kind of follow the notes I've got here, Peter, and I think I'm handing back to you, aren't I, to get us going?
Okay, we can do that. So I'm going to share my screen. No, I'm not going to. Yes, I'm going to share my screen with you. And just wait for the technology to do its thing. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through where to find information about the election and the candidate statements on the CAPaD website. So this is the CAPaD website. There are two places. There's this incredibly obvious place where you can go to our 2020 election page. So that's just in the middle of the home page. Or there's this tab up here where it says elections, and you can go to the 2020 election page there. On the 2020 election page, there is a link to take you to the candidate statements and lists of the candidates as we know them for each electorate. So you can find them there. And there's a flyer which we'll come back to later on. There's something we call our statement of MLA and citizen expectations, which we'll come back to later. But there is actually the candidate statement. And this is what we're asking the MLAs to fill in. You can download copies of the candidate statements from here, either a PDF version or a Word version if you want to, send it to somebody. Or you can download them, print them out, give them out. But then the actual text of the statement, what we're asking the candidates to fill in, is pretty straightforward. Who they are, what electorate they're in, what party they are a member of, and then the sort of 6 key questions. What do they think their skills and experience are for being an MLA? What skills and experience they think they would bring to the ministry. I mean, after all, there are only 25 MLAs. Slightly over about 2/3 of them are in government, and that doesn't leave a lot of MLAs to fill all the ministerial positions. So the probability that you will end up with a ministerial position is reasonably high. And so, why would the Chief Minister want to pick you as a minister? Why would we want to vote for you so that the Chief Minister can pick you as a minister? Clearly, we want them to have thought through how they're going to represent us as constituents. And the sort of answers that we're expecting there, I mean, we're leaving it quite open, will tell us a little bit about whether they've thought through this idea of being a representative, what you actually have to do to engage with and work with community and people in the community, and how they plan on doing that. And we also want them thinking about how they're going to strengthen and promote good government in the ACT, because part of their role as an MLA is to make sure the government is working well. And then, because we're the Canberra Alliance for Participatory Democracy, we want to know what steps they've thought about how to involve the community to participate in policy development and the implementation of policy, the review of policy, accountability measures, the whole raft of keeping government open and accountable. And then finally, we've just asked them to, in a way, sort of motherhood statement-ish, but, are they going to abide by this statement of democratic commitments? So there is standing orders about the conduct of MLAs. They've got a sign that they're going to adhere to them as part of, I think, being sworn as an MLA. But we've picked out a couple in particular to make them think about the sources of making, people they could be forced to be beholden to open, so that we can all know that, and just to put the public interest in front of any personal interests they might have, or any interests that somebody might be paying them to have for them. So that's the candidate statement.
Okay, thanks, Peter. And maybe we should just invite anyone to ask any questions about what Peter's just gone over there in the candidate statement. Does anybody want to ask a question?
Sure, a quick one.
Yeah.
Yeah, my name's Peter Alford. I'm the president of the Gungahlin Community Council. Do you have any indication from the ALP or the Liberals or the Greens that they would support their candidates completing this?
We have no indication from any of the Liberals or the ALP that they've made any commitment or talked to their candidates at all. We know that the Greens have already sent in 4 candidate statements, and the party I know have talked about it, and we're waiting for the 2 other candidates to send in their statements.
Okay. And just a quick follow-up one. Is there any mechanism to lower the barrier for them to do this by making it the form online? We have thought about making the form online, and it would definitely make it easier for us if the form was online when we come to the analysis stage. But we didn't have the capacity this election to do that yet, mainly because we don't have anyone who's that clever in playing with our website. So if you know anyone who can help out like that, we'd be really happy. But definitely in future, I think, bringing it as an online form would be the way to go. Okay.
You haven't got any suggestions, Peter, have you, about how we could tackle that problem?
Well, I'm sure I could bumble through and get something out, but I know people who know people, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Who looks after the website now? It doesn't look like it's hosted with any sort of, I don't know, substantive content platform that I recognise, but.
Well, I'm the acting webmaster because the person who was doing the job for us left earlier in the year because they got involved in another organisation, which took a lot of their time, and so they couldn't compete. The interests were competing, and they inherited it from sort of somebody else. So it really needs a major overhaul. We recognise this. So at the moment, I'm just sort of working through it as best I can. Now, when you say no recognisable platform, what did you mean by that?
It doesn't look like it's running on WordPress, for example.
It is running on WordPress, but it's got a cadence theme.
Okay, right. Well, I'm happy to spend an amount of time looking at that rather than get mired in the details. But
yeah, okay. That's fine.
I'll have a chat.
Yeah,
thanks,
okay.
Peter. Anybody else got any other questions about the candidate Plaxi?
I'm wondering about the word limits. They seem quite small.
Correct. We want to force the candidates to think clearly when they articulate what they want to tell us, and not sort of just pad it out with lots of, sonne lumiere, which doesn't mean a whole lot.
Okay.
Is that okay for you, Plaxi?
Yep.
Yeah. Anyone else got any other questions? Yeah, Kevin? You're on mute, Kevin.
Yeah, trying to find it where it was. You've got to, it's easier for them if you give them a series of different possibilities on ways in which they can promote good government. Is there a reason to make it so open-ended that you're unlikely to be able to get some of those nice things that we know about, like like some of these sit-ins and jury things that have occurred?
We want to force them to demonstrate that they have thought this through and not just give them a series of menu items they could tick without really thinking about it. So it's a way we think of differentiating between those candidates who've actually thought about this and those candidates who haven't really thought about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to follow up on that, have you thought about being able to combine your results with other groups who are doing similar sorts of things?
Yes, well, we've had some conversations with a few other groups. Everybody seems to want to do their own thing. The reason why CAPaD is different, we've found, is because we're not focusing on the policy details of party platforms, and we're not asking people to differentiate between different ways of greening Canberra, for instance. We're actually focused on the mechanics of getting good representatives to get good government. And that covers all the possible topics and areas of interest that people might have. And the second thing is we don't want to rate candidates according to the responses they give us. We want to be able to present this information to voters who can then use that to compare candidates and decide who they're going to vote for based on the answers to these questions rather than based on a policy platform.
Okay, and Christine.
Yes, I think it might be useful, Peter, just very briefly to inform people about what proportion of the candidates responded last time, because I think it was a reasonably high amount, wasn't it?
Yes, I should have checked the numbers. I think there were somewhere like 100 candidates. We had something like 45 responses, and of those 45 who responded, 15 of them actually ended up as MLAs.
Okay, who else we got here?
Yes,
Bernard, and then Tony.
So very quickly, and this is really nitpicking, at the end of the statement of democratic commitment, you've put placing the public interest, blah, 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 and the integrity of the planet. And I was wondering why you chose those particular words rather than a more generic environment.
I don't know.
Because it looks like a big ask.
I'm trying to go back through my memory of the long discussions we had around coming up with the wording.
I'm sure they were. Yeah.
I'm thinking we decided the environment was too broad.
Mm-hmm.
Ecology was okay, but if we wanted to think about planet as a system of systems, then I think that's where we got to the integrity of the planet from.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks. That was a good question, Jill. So,
Can I say something? Get in the queue, please.
okay, yeah. Who's that?
Martha.
Oh, sorry, Martha.
It's okay.
I'm staring into the sun at my place, so I'm not.
Yeah,
off you go, right. And then Tony can go after you.
Oh, I'm happy to wait my turn. I just didn't know whether you can see me or not.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks. Well, you might as well ask your question now, and then we'll go to Tony.
Well, it really goes back to this question of whether the word limit is too short, and or whether there should be more a more specific indication of what you want people to say. I had a look at a couple of the candidate statements, and they were the Greens, which I imagine they've done more of them than the others. It did seem to me that making it so short and open-ended at the same time did leave leaves the option open for generally what might be called motherhood statements. One statement I read was good. The other was anybody could have written it, you know, pretending they were agreeing. I'm wondering, I like open-ended questions rather than forced examples, but I'm wondering if we can ask them to give specific examples of the changes that they will advocate. That is to say, not just I believe in this or these are the measures that I will advocate this change. I mean, one, for example, would be what they mean by good community consultation on big development applications. I noticed one statement has just said, I believe in community, you know, involvement and participation. Very easy to say. So I'm just wondering if the questions can be changed a little bit to ask them to force a response which says, this isn't right at the moment and this is how I'll change it, or try to change it.
Okay, so
without trying to direct, without trying to imply any direction of the change.
Yep.
Just saying why I want to be a candidate. This is why I want to take these measures, or these are the measures I want to take that aren't there now.
Okay, so there's two bits to this question.
Yeah, there
in
are.
terms of changing this one, because this is now in the public domain and we've sent it out to parties and candidates have started to fill it in, we probably can't change it now, but we can take ideas like this on board for the next year's or the next election to bring that in. And the idea of asking for specific examples as a prompt, I think, is a useful one. Again, in terms of this statement, I think if a candidate comes back and makes waffly motherhood statements, but another candidate comes in and actually, you know, says, okay, well, look, this is my program for protecting democracy, or this is my program of you know, getting constituents involved in policy, and they've actually set some stuff out, and you know, they've given it in a series of fairly succinct dot points. That gives voters quite a lot of both content information, but also information about how well the candidate has prepared for the job. And so I think we're working on the principle that the really good candidates who thought this through are going to be the people who will give a dot point list of practical examples.
Martha, did you think Peter's covered all your question there?
If it's in the public domain already, then I agree it can't be changed. But 4 years is a long time to wait to try and get some more movement on this. So now my question is, given that there's 4 months before the next election, once we get these statements in, is there any way that we can say thank you very much for your answers? It's great that you responded, and we would like to know a bit more about this aspect or that aspect of your response. I'm happy to do the administration of that second stage. I'm quite good at administering questionnaires and things, so I'm happy to take that on if people agree that we could do it. I have to be frank and say I'm particularly concerned that we're going to get very formulaic responses from the Liberal and Labor Party, and frankly, new candidates, newly elected members won't be able to change much in those parties. And I'm interested in the Independents and Greens and any other minor party, the Belko Party, for instance, interested in seeing just how they're going to operate in a sort of still the presumption of a sort of two-party laydown, not a laydown misère, but a two-party formula for government in the ACT.
All right, so this actually picks up on when later on in today's session when we start to think about what you are prepared to help out doing, and I think that would be a very helpful addition to ideas about what we can do.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Martha. And sorry I didn't see your hand there earlier. I'm looking across my screen here to make sure I get everyone. So Tony, did you want to ask?
I'm not very good on the camera anyway.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Look, a couple of questions, and I don't live in the ACT, but I'm very curious about the process you're going through. So just for an answer to this at some point, will all the responses be loaded at the same time, or will some of the early responses get picked over by others who can get a chance to see what's already been put out there? Yeah, the other question is, for parties or individuals that choose not to play and produce a statement, will there be a covering statement sitting in the background to say that all were invited? And if a party says, no, we don't want to participate in what you're doing, we ask for a statement to that effect that can sit on your website to say, you'll note there's none from X party sitting here, and the party have said they're not supporting this process, and this is their stated reason. Just so that there's, and I'm not sure, you mentioned 45 out of 100 turned up last time, but if there's a pattern about who support this kind of transparent attempt about improving democracy, and those that are continually suspicious about it and don't want to play. And the last point I've got, and I like the idea of open questions, and it might actually be useful to say, look, you'll note the word limit isn't high, and you might actually say, look, you're looking for some really deep, thoughtful statements here, and not party policy. It's what you personally bring to it. And the last question I've got here is raised already about the statement of democratic commitment. So some people will look through those items and say, look, I go along with most of that, but I can't fully agree with those three statements. And how they might respond to that, particularly if they're a bit concerned about the wording of integrity of the planet and so and so and so. Is this an area where they actually just make a statement to say, yes, I agree with these three, or can they massage some words around how well they support those three statement options?
In the previous election, we said that people could change the wording if they wanted of the statement of democratic commitment. We actually ran the statement of democratic commitment past the parties last time, and we had feedbacks from the Liberals, Labor and the Green about what they would consider acceptable wording. And so we've essentially carried that wording on into this election. The only thing we've added here is that sort of definition of the public interest. But the wording otherwise was the same that the parties agreed to previously. And we've introduced we'll strictly abide by the Legislative Assembly Standing Orders Code of Conduct for MLAs, just because, I mean, that's there. They all have to agree to it. Nobody's going to say, I'm not going to agree to that.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to ask? These are great questions you're all asking. Anyone else got some more? Okay.
Sorry, can I ask one more? Sorry, let me.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just a procedural thing. I've looked at the website. I was trying to look at 2016 to see if any of the same candidates were there and here, and if they'd responded earlier, what they'd said. And I couldn't actually find copies of their statements for 2016 on the website. Is it on the website, or that's it?
Yeah, the 2016, we did the recording slightly differently. And so we've got, in the 2016, we've got the list of candidates who gave a statement, who didn't give a statement. And if you go, unless this is broken, if you go in there, you've got the list of candidates who did provide a statement. Now, to find the statements is actually complicated because, again,
no, it's okay. I couldn't find it, so that's all right. At least it wasn't me being totally silly.
The website is a little hard to find stuff, particularly,
Yeah.
Same experience.
So maybe, Peter, just good to note the difficulties that people are having sort of in the things that they want to do there. And,
yep, I will take note of that. I'll just make note to self. I'll put it on my webmaster list of things to do. Find.
Yeah.
You know, if the major issue for that CAPaD is active in right now, then that should be really obvious on the front page of the website, and you know, usual sort of cut through, go straight to 2020.
More obvious than this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
While I've stolen this talking stick, I've been thinking
hang
about.
on. I just want to clarify.
Yep.
That's what we've got on the front page. So
Yeah,
when you first, so that's okay, or do we need to do something? Do you think?
I think it's good.
I felt like I'd come to a wall of words.
Sure.
No, I'm being very harsh, but you know.
Please be harsh.
It's, you know, our vision. Where is it? CAPaP's featured event. I can't quickly see. Okay, here it is. Look at our 2020 election page. It's words.
You're on your phone. That's what's happened.
No, I'm on a dual screen laptop. But anyway.
I think it's best to just listen, Peter. I think Peter's giving some good feedback there about a wall of words, and for him it's not as easy, and others are finding it.
I understand this is hard, having recently redone a website. So
yeah, no, that's good, Peter. What about you, Plaxi? You got a question?
I wanted to support what Peter was just saying about the difficulty finding the actual statements. I thought that that had been addressed, but I remember how difficult it was a few years ago. Another thing I wanted to ask, if we're going to look at the statement of expectations as well, because I had a minor thing on that.
We want to do another body of work around the statement of expectations, and I think just from a capacity point of view, that's being put back to after the election, because most of our energy is going into the election. But we do really want to have a serious conversation with people about what's in there. What we've put in there so far, we've gleaned from talking to people at a couple of Southfests and another public event, and we've took their comments on board. We've grown it out of our own reading and our own experience, but we want to test it out more and develop it more.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, do you want to just make the comment that you had on that anyway, just at this stage?
From memory, it was that you could click, it would say, download the statement if you want to have a look at it. This is the statement. And then halfway down the statement, it says, we're preparing a statement coming soon. So I couldn't tell whether I was looking at the statement or not.
Okay, that's good feedback. Thanks for that.
Okay.
Now, does anybody else have a question before we move on?
Actually, can you just flick me an email later with that sentence in it? That will prompt me to remember to go and have a look.
Sure.
And do some editing.
So, Gilles?
I know my name's Bernard on the system, but yes, I use my middle name anyway. Yes, so my own little comment is for the pending other improvements, the fact that it's all very light orange, etc., and it sort of fades into the background, as the other Peter said. I would suggest if you just just increase the font and make it darker. That alone, in the meantime, might help until you work out a better way of doing it. Just a suggestion to keep it as simple as possible for Peter.
Yeah. Thanks, Gilles.
Yes.
Anybody else?
Kevin here.
Kevin, yep.
So look, I've just put a question up in the chat room, and Peter has also put one up there. That might be an easy way for people to say that they have a question, actually put something up there. And the question that I've got, or the statement that I've got, is what actually happened to the last statements? Was there any accountability, if you like, from the people who filled them out as to what they said they would do, and they got elected? Did they actually do the things that they said they were going to do? That would be a very interesting bit of information.
Yeah,
that's why I was looking for them before.
Yeah, we didn't have the capacity to go back and run sort of an accountability mechanism about that. We've had some conversations with some of the political science mob at ANU about trying to build that capacity, but that hasn't got very far so far. We're just sort of talking around what might be possible. There are various other websites, like the They Vote For You website, that we are going to set up links for in our ideas and resources section so that people can begin to follow the statements themselves, but we haven't got the capacity to report back. What we did do last year is we went through and we interviewed we invited all the sitting MLAs to have an interview with us, and we talked them through for those who filled in a candidate statement, how did that go? How did that inform them being an MLA? And for those who hadn't filled in a candidate statement, we just asked them a bit about being an MLA and what that was like, and we introduced them to the candidate statement. And it was some of those interviews that went into forming the statement of MLA expectations. But we haven't had the capacity, and we would really like to be able to do that full accountability stuff. 2 years through, do a midterm, this is how we think you're going, scoring against some criteria. And towards the end, again, if you're standing for re-election, this is, what you said you'd do, and this is what you actually did. So that, again, voters can make an informed choice about what they like to do. We'd love to be able to do that.
Okay. Thanks. Anybody want to say anything else? Hey, well, just to let you know, Peter Elford has just put another comment into chat. Peter, did you want to speak to that at all, or we just leave it there in the chat?
Just very quickly, I thought thinking about the public interest reference in the last clause, I think keeping it really simple helps make it a bit more real. And the whole reference to the planet, this really is actually about trying to get good local government and trying to keep it local. So I just Googled, what's a good reference definition of public interest? The welfare or well-being of the general public is the first thing that came up. So it just seemed that was a little simpler than trying to expect the member for Yerraby to impact the planet. I mean, I want them to care about the planet, but I actually want them to care.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Okay, well, look, that was a really good lot of questions there, and it'll probably make some of the things we're going on to next a bit easier, so dealt with that. Peter, do you want to move us on to the next part of this?
All right. So, essentially what we want to do is, as I said in the introduction, we want to promote this to candidates, to get candidates to fill it out and send it back to us. And we want to encourage voters to go and have a look at it so that they can use this information to inform how they're going to place their vote or who they're going to tick off on the ballot paper. So we did a survey earlier in the year asking people to give us some ideas, and we also made up a few ideas of our own. And these are they. So people have told us that this is the things they think we should be doing or that they would be prepared to do to help promote the candidate statement. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes or a minute to read through them. And we're basically doing this so that when you bring up suggestions, you're not reinventing wheels we've already got. Although you might want to elaborate on some of them, that would be fine.
What should we be looking at?
So on your screen, in my share screen, there is a Word document with ideas we have already have for members. Can you all see that?
No.
Nah.
We're still seeing the...
we still see your webpage.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, so let me...
I couldn't find it in the first place.
Yeah, all right. Does that work better?
No.
Okay, let's go back.
Where is it on the website? We can get it up ourselves.
It's not on the website, it's on my computer.
Oh, okay.
So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to tell it to do a new share.
I can see it okay, Peter.
There it is.
There we go.
Yep.
Got it.
Okay,
Okay, good.
sorry.
There's something else I was referring to. I hadn't found an attachment to one of your emails, Peter. That was the survey results or something. I couldn't find that.
Okay. Was it a web link or?
I don't know, because there was nothing attached to that particular email. Or at least on mine, there wasn't anything attached. This is going back to the 11th of June or something.
Yep. Okay.
That's just an aside. It wasn't referring to this list, which
Yep.
I have seen.
Yep. I think this list is a condensation of that other putative attachment. So we're going to run through a set of questions here, but first of all, we're going to do a bit of a brainstorm. Are there other, and we'd invite you to add your ideas to the chat so that that will then become a document that we can download and use. So if you can start sort of cascading into chat.
So the question there, Peter, is that this list that you've just shown us and we've been reading is the collected wisdom at the moment on what we can do.
Yes.
And now we're asking anyone to just type into chat what additional things you think we can brainstorm to add to this list. So just take a few minutes writing down in as much detail or specificity what you think needs to happen here. So there's some, Megan's done a great entry there, and oh no, but she's actually telling us that she's leaving.
Are we trying to hold, okay, the mission here is to improve the quality of candidates.
Yes.
Are we trying to hold the candidates accountable, which kind of refers to Kevin's question earlier, or are we trying to get electors to be more thoughtful?
We're trying to get electors to be more thoughtful in the first instance. There are other ways we're thinking about how you make candidates more elected MLAs more accountable down the track.
Okay, so we're trying to make, okay, so what's really important is therefore if we can work out what channels there are to get to lots of people. And you know, obviously things like Facebook are important, but it's just saying Facebook's not enough. You know, you need to try and find those Facebook entities that have large followings of the sorts of people you are trying to reach. So certainly in the Combined Community Councils meeting, we talked briefly about what we could do for CAPaD, and the conclusion was each community council would want to, make its own decision about how they engage with CAPaD. So I think one of the key bullet items, which I will type now to make a record of it, is find organisations that have communities of Canberra residents you want to interact with. So ACCOS would be another one. Pedal Power would be another one, where they're bodies that are representative of Canberra residents that could act as a channel to get to more people. And they may or may not want to support the process of candidate statements. But as an individual organisation trying to get your message out, that's really, really hard. Trying to convince other organisations to get your message out means you'll get your message out wider.
Yep.
Great, Peter. Anyone else want to talk to things that they're putting into the chat as well? So just make your brainstorming into chat, and then we can look at what patterns and themes are emerging from that.
From my simple perspective, having a presence similar to that, what happens before elections at shopping centres, but it will depend on available resources, obviously. Having people around with some simple signage and perhaps flyers, it's a way of directly talking to people. It's something that's used fairly often. And I agree with the community council side of things too, that that would be a good way to get the word out a bit.
Anybody want to say anything else about the brainstormed list?
Richard Rowe here. I typed something in the chat, but I'm not sure that it's sent.
Oh, okay.
Don't forget to hit enter.
Once you've typed it into the little text area, you just push enter, and that should come up.
It's Martha here. Most of the dot points that we're looking at are about dissemination of what we're doing.
Yep.
And getting people involved. But the second dot point, well, the first 2 dot points are related to dialogue with candidates. So my point that I've put into chat is that I think there was some mention of interviews, follow-up interviews earlier on in this meeting. And I think that would be a very good idea because it allows you to ask questions for clarification, ask for examples, and probably make better, clearer distinctions between the quality of different candidates, particularly if they're all coming from the same party.
Yep.
So, excuse me for jumping in. Martha, are you thinking we could run interviews before the election and make the results public?
Yeah, I do. I mean, we've got 4 months, and I think that just looking at the candidate statements that I've been able to read so far, even that they're mainly Greens, and even they are fairly bland, with a couple of interesting exceptions. Labor and Liberal are likely to be even more bland, and I'm not sure we're going to engage a whole lot of diverse people unless we get a few more specifics from the candidates about what they think is right and wrong and what they want to do. So I think, you know, we talked about how short the limited number of words and the generality of the questions, and I think that's, especially since it's already in the public domain, that document, I think that's fair enough as a starting point. But apparently there were some interviews last time in 2016 from what I've just been hearing, and it seems to me that it would be really good to do some interviews. Also with candidates who haven't responded, to ask them why not, as it says here. But, you know, face-to-face interviews, I know there's a lot of effort in it, but it can be very, very effective.
Yes, I'd like to, what I was talking about there is supporting that, is that CAPaD, we've got to actually help people try and understand what the hell's going on. And it's really quite difficult to read all these different statements and then form a judgment. It would be nice to know if there is some way in which CAPaD itself can form an opinion about things and say this is, well, not necessarily an opinion, but working out what people are actually trying to say in their different things to help voters understand what the hell's going on, because it's really difficult to do, and it's very wasteful, if you like, for everyone in the community to have to do that. Whereas what we want to do is to have people to help us do those sorts of things.
Yep. One of the ideas we're toying with, if we had the capacity to do an online form, is that the actual candidate's statement for each question would get downloaded to the database could then be searched by question rather than by candidate. And so you could look at a question and then that would give you a list of candidates and their answers to that question. So you could compare across questions.
Yes, I think we can help out there. Peter and I can do something on that.
Okay.
My wife is 10 times cleverer than me on this, so I'm hopeful I can get some answers.
Excellent.
Another way of looking at it is more demographic groups. Like I think a lot of the parties these days are sort of fine-tuning more on that. And so, I mean, we at this stage are appealing to a certain group of people. How do we get to those ones that are, I don't know, from who don't normally want to think about it till the last minute? And that's always the hardest one, I suppose. It's sort of, they could be quite influenced if they can, yeah, get attracted to looking at this a little bit earlier on in some ways through some of these social media or whatever. Yeah, I don't have the answers, but just looking at it from that point of view rather than a more general, the whole electorate kind of idea.
Yep. Any more comments, more ideas?
The only one I can think of is that also a place for encouraging electors themselves to contact their MLAs to ask them questions.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone got any other brainstormed ideas or things they want to contribute to this part of the conversation? Okay, well, let's move on to the next bit. Actually, I'm still trying to get my screen real estate to show me what we've got here. So, Peter, did you want to frame this or do you want me to? I'm following your notes here. So the question is, what other ideas can you think that you or someone else might be able to do to get candidates to sign on and to promote the campaign to others?
Yes, I think we've just done that bit, Mark. So I guess what I was going to do now is just introduce people to the flyer.
Yeah, good on you, Peter. Thank you.
So this is interesting, technology. Maybe it's my mouse. All right, so just assuming that everybody can see the CAPaD website, which is what's supposed to be happening. Can you all see the CAPaD website?
Yes.
Yep. Thank you. Okay. So if we go back to the 2020 election page, one of the materials that we've developed for use is this idea of a candidate flyer. And I'll just show you that one as an example. So we've produced these. So one of the people's options might be to download these and hand them out, download them and use them as a poster to stick up in workplaces or in cafes or outside shopping centres. And again, it's an idea. It's one resource that we have used, what we have created for use. So I'm just introducing you to its existence. And it essentially summarises what we're doing very briefly. And the idea is this is, you know, the framing is compare candidates, go to the election. This is what we're asking them to do. Hopefully then when people go to the election page, then they can begin to find their way around, and they'll go here and then they can go there, and off it goes. So really this is what's there. As I said, there are two versions. There's a 2A5 to a page flyer, and there's a single A4 that you can download and print out. I suppose any comments or questions on that?
Well, I put it on the chat, but I think I was a bit late in getting it there. I can't help remembering back to a previous federal election. I think it's maybe 2 or 3 years ago, 3 elections ago, maybe not that long, when GetUp had a flyer in which they kind of had a traffic light system comparing the parties on the matters that they were particularly interested in. And I think that we could set something up on this website here, which could be a bit more nuanced than that, by doing a similar thing, but having a link to the candidate statements which cover the area that you're talking about, like the environment or participatory democracy or whatever. I think that might just help people rather than having to troll through all the statements and taking a little pen and writing down bits and trying to figure out for themselves how to compare these candidates. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Can I ask Margaret a question?
Yes.
Are you talking about, I understand what you're saying about the link to the candidate statements, but are you talking about a traffic light system for candidates or for parties? And if it's for parties, it seems to me that might aggregate things up to really lose sight of individual candidates, particularly.
No. I'm just saying that's what CAPaD did.
CAPaD.
GetUp did.
Covered those parties, but we could do it differently. We've got individual candidates making statements, and we could do a traffic light system for them on the particular issues that we're talking about, that we're concerned about.
Thanks, Margaret and Martha. Christine, did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, thanks. So is this something that we can still modify, Peter, or is this something that's sort of done? Because the reason I ask is that, as we know, people tend to vote along the lines of somebody they think, who they like, they believe they share their values with them. And that's why the CAPaD's approach of the candidate statements good, I think, because it sort of personalises it. You know, what am I going to do? What am I passionate about kind of approach. And I think this flyer could have a bit more of that kind of feel to it, you know, like, because if you look at it, it's very much head stuff, although it is about values, but some way of getting a more heart response, I suppose, is what I'm thinking of. For example, qualified to represent you. It just seems a bit too much head stuff to me.
Okay. I mean, essentially, we just adopted the flyer from the candidate statement by editing it down severely. But I'm open to the idea of other sorts of handouts that we could use. I think that would have a different focus and a different take.
Well, maybe just stay with that first one. Even just sort of what appeals to you with this candidate as a representative or something, rather than something that sort of triggers more emotional or values stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Thought, yeah.
Thanks, Christine. Anyone else got any other comments or questions about the flyer?
Look, I'd just observe in 2020, when did we do that? In 2014 or 15, the Community Council ran a survey, and we were trying to promote people to do the survey, and we printed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of leaflets and spent a lot of money distributing them. And we were able to see that when we put out things like hard copy leaflets, it had absolutely no impact on the number of people doing the survey. As soon as we actually put in a lot of work into getting content, getting messages out in very short Facebook, Twitter, or email posts, we could see discernible blips in the number of people undertaking, getting engaged with the process. I don't think spending much time on leaflets is worthwhile. I think you'd be better off spending time on getting a very succinct, crisp message and some good, impactful graphics that you can put into Facebook and promote, encourage other groups with Facebook to promote, the 21st century term would be some decent branding that you can relate to, because again, you've got to try and work out how you can get everyone to get engaged in this very quickly. You're trying to have, I think someone made the comment, it's very head-centric. You want people to think, oh, look, I really do want to find out about this. I really want to, demand more, expect more of my candidate, and come up with a little tagline along those, that sort of gesture, and getting some digital artifacts you can get out there. I think you'll get more traction with that than you might with a leaflet that gets printed out and stuck on shop windows.
Thanks, Peter.
Yep.
Barbara.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I seem to have spent a lot of time in my life trying to get leaflets distributed to appropriate places, but really they take up an inordinate amount of or a disproportionate amount of your time for the effects that they produce. And they're, and if you're trying to put them up in public places, there's often very few places that you're allowed to put them, and they're not in the most prominent of places. It's a very time-consuming exercise, and I don't think it produces much. So I'd agree. It'd be better to be focusing on the more digital areas.
Thanks, Barbara. Gilles?
I agree. I have completely changed my perspective. I agree with Peter.
Okay, Plaxi?
I've just done a workshop with Doug Mackenzie-Moore on community-based social marketing, which is about driving behaviour change and not relying on information-intensive campaigns, largely digital and printed material providing information, because that doesn't tend to lead to behaviour change. And one of the things that does is asking people to make a commitment and making that commitment public where possible. And I'm imagining that we could make it possible for people to say, to tick a box on the website to say, I'm going to ring my candidate. I'm going to ring them and I'm going to ask them this question, or tick a box for which question they've decided they're going to ask, and then a spot for them to come back to the website and report back what ensued. Just an idea.
Thanks, Plaxi. Anyone else?
Yeah, yes, I'm not mute. From my point of view, I think I certainly agree about information intense, lots of little notices with writing on all over the place. They don't have any impact at all. But from my point of view, I'm wondering to what extent this organisation is trying to simply get people saying, yes, we believe in democracy, or whether we're trying to act as an intermediary, if you like, between people who have got key issues that may not be happy or may not even know whether candidates are going to represent them or not, and the candidates, in which case, going back to the conversation some time ago about what groups in Canberra we should link to. Pedal Power was mentioned, the theatre group I think was mentioned, certainly the community councils were mentioned, and there'd be others, there's Council of the Ageing and so on. In which case, should we not be asking them what are the issues that they would like us to draw to the candidates' attention?
Okay, thanks, Martha.
That's a quite different approach. I mean, they're not in competition, the different approaches, but they are different.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's, Plaxy's just indicated this idea of how we're making commitments, public commitments to each other. And I've got a sense that this next exercise that Peter's designed for us is along those lines. But if you just grab your A4 sheet of paper and have it in landscape and just draw it into 3 columns. And in the chat box, there's 3 questions, and I'll just go over them. And so question 1 is, of the options that we've been talking about, what can you commit to doing? And write these down in the first column on the page. And then question 2, so column number 2 is, what do you need to prepare to do the action listed in column 1? And write that down in column 2. And question 3, when do you think that you'll have completed this preparation? And when do you think you what do you need to get ready? So that's the, probably using a bit of Plaxy's idea about we all make commitments here to each other. And a few of us have done it there. So whether that's a bit too wordy or in the head, or if you want to go into your heart and find what you've got access to, and again, you know, you don't feel obliged to do something that doesn't give you satisfaction. So I go for the heart stuff. See if you can find something that you would be energized by. And I think you've all asked some great questions today. So just take a few minutes on your own to do that exercise. Does anyone want to ask any questions about this before we do that?
Just one question. When you say what can we commit to? I mean, I can commit to doing things in conjunction with the organisation or with the imprimatur of the organisation if people agree, and possibly not just me. I've mentioned several times the follow-up interviews and the linking of candidates to particular issues and issue groups. So, but I wouldn't want to just sort of go off and do it and then let you know that I completed it. Obviously, it has to be it has to be an organisational policy that this is going to happen. I wouldn't want to be the only one, or I'm happy to carry a considerable load of those things, and that has to be agreed. Sort of the approach that we're going to use has to be agreed. So I can't see how I can actually answer these questions in the sort of brief way you've asked, unless we have a fourth question. Well, how do I say it? I don't want to do it as an individual.
I reckon you should put that in whatever column. Well, you've expressed it really well here, so we need to have a collective approach to this. So thanks, Martha. That's great. Well, look, we've got this structure. If you want to modify it, you do it as well. But just take a few moments to write down on your sheet of paper your answers to those, and then we'll see if we've got a collective view about things that we can organise together to meet Martha's needs as well.
Yes, so I think the idea of the exercise was to think about what you as individuals can do with your friends and family and work colleagues and relations and neighbours and candidates who come knocking on your door or you go knocking on their door. But Martha has introduced a very interesting next element, which might be what can we collectively do? And maybe if we can come back to that in a few moments when you've had a bit of a chance to think about this.
So, sorry, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be committing to. Where are the options?
Well, they were the ideas that we put up in that Word document earlier on.
Oh.
You know, give to the candidates, talk to your friends, retweet our messages, follow us on Facebook, post and share anything we put on Facebook. That sort of list that we had up previously, which I can put back up if anyone would find that useful.
Thank you. That would be excellent.
Okay.
My memory is not that long.
Yeah, mine isn't either.
Okay, let me just make this technology work. It's interesting. Double clicking doesn't work. You have to actively share it. And, you know, included would be the other actions that we've brainstormed are on the chat, or any other ideas you have. But the idea, I think, that there might be collective action we can talk about in a couple of minutes.
I'm assuming by that body language and gesture that everybody's done enough on that. Peter, what's the best way to deal with what everyone's written down there for your needs?
Well, my needs are really, if people have got this written down, then they will take some ownership of doing with themselves or for themselves or with friends, colleagues and neighbours what they've said they're going to do. I think we were going to get people to make some public commitment. So we could run around the group and ask for that public commitment, but I'm also conscious that we've got only about 13 minutes left for this, and I think Martha has brought up some interesting or an interesting idea that we need to spend a bit of time on as well.
Okay, well, maybe the simplest way to deal with that is just use the chat to just summarise what you're committed to do from this process that we just talked about now. Just put that into the chat now as part of your, Plaxy's describing it as making public commitments is a way that behavioural change happens in the world. So we'll see if it works with that sort of approach. Yeah, with the 10 minutes or so that we've got left, Peter, how do you want to have the conversation about the collective approach to this, or other matters that you want to deal with?
Well, so a bit of, I don't know, descriptive logistics. The MLA roles, responsibilities and relationships action group is the action group within the CAPaD that is running this election campaign. And so by joining that action group, that gives anybody who's interested the ability to participate in this planning and the activity that it's generating. The action group so far is myself, Bob Douglas, Beth Slatcher, Margaret Lee, and Sue Ingram. And I think if people want to get involved with that, then we're really happy to have them come along. And again, we could have sub-action groups. So it might be somebody wants to go off and do something that Martha is proposing, and Martha and a couple of people could go off and do that. You know, we don't necessarily have to, I mean, we would, the action group and CAPaD committee would have an oversight role, but it wouldn't necessarily have to be involved in the meticulous planning. And that subgroup could recruit other members and non-members to the action if they were interested in helping, really. So it's very open and flexible like that.
Does anybody want to ask Peter any questions or make any comments about this as we're coming towards a close for today?
Yeah, since my name's been mentioned. how can we find out, well, how can I find out what that action group's doing already?
I will send you an email.
That's great. Thank you. We can follow it up like that then.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to make a comment or a question?
A quick one.
Good on you, Peter.
Peter mentioned there are other groups doing something similar, but they all want to do their own thing. I think we really do need to try and harmonise that effort. So even if we can map out, there are 5 groups or 17 groups or how many it is, and why they have different emphasis and why the CAPaD candidate statement is worthy of their time. I think that's important. Otherwise, we just become part of the chatter. Or the CAPaD becomes part of the chatter. Everyone wants yet another form that they think is uniquely special to what they want to talk about. I do think that it's worth making an effort to try and get all the different groups trying to do pretty much the same thing onto the same, maybe not on the same page, but you could put their ideas down on one page and you can say, oh, I see what they're asking and what they're asking. They're issues based, they're heart based, they're head based. I don't know how you'd categorize that, but I don't even know who those groups were that you were referring to, Peter, for example.
So we've started to chat to ACTCOS and the Conservation Council, Sea Change, as you're aware, the Community Councils group, and that's sort of as far as we've gone so far. And the response is either, well, the election's a long way off, we haven't really started planning yet, we're just thinking about it. But what we normally do, is we have this issue and we go and ask the candidates what their stance is on this issue.
Yep.
And so that's what most of the mainstream issues focus groups response would be. We've had one group say, look, we don't usually do this because it's seen as political and we don't want to be seen to be political, but we're happy to promote your statement to our members. So fine. The tension that CAPaD has had is that we're trying, CAPaD's issue is the state of democracy. And while we recognise, it's important to have action on climate change and it's important to have planning and development done better in the ACT, and we need better education, and we need all sorts of these other issues addressed, trying to say, yes, we agree with that. The path to getting your outcome is through making government work better, and this bit of that puzzle is getting good candidates in there who are going to work with us, the community. People go, yeah, but I still need to spend time doing my issue. And so that's the tension we're in.
But I guess that's the piece, is you want to try and identify that both are important.
Yes.
And ask that ACTCOS, so we're focused around social services, but we also think the CAPaD statement is great.
Yes.
And we would say the same about them. So trying to create a bit of a mesh of love between those issues.
That's right. So we're in the process of having a series of negotiation with a series of other groups as they come up. I hadn't thought about pedal power until today, but you're right. Those are the groups, if they can promote our statement and we can link on our website to whatever they're doing.
Okay, I'm just aware we're coming towards the end, and thanks for these. I'm sorry we haven't been able to give everyone a chance to express themselves, but does anyone want to say anything that's really relevant to where we're up to here before we close? Yeah, Barbara?
Yeah, sorry, I just think what Peter just said then is really crucial, because I confess that, I get not lost, but I get very absorbed in the specific issues that I'm doing lobbying and advocacy work on, and then to try and not separate, but to try and present what we're trying to do with CAPaD, that is democracy as an issue in itself. I think it's quite difficult to do that, and I'm not sure how we
we get that message across, because people might just be fairly dismissive of, well, what do you mean we are a democratic country? So what do we mean by democracy? So I mean, it's quite easy, well, not easy, but, you know, if you're on lobbying on specific issues like climate change or etc., then, you know, you've got an easier job in a way than what we've got to do. So I guess I'd like a bit more guidance, if you like, on how we actually present democracy per se.
Thanks, Barbara. Yeah, these are really great questions. Margaret?
I was just going to say that just about everything we're concerned about has a democratic issue involved. And I think while we are focusing on the issue that we're really concerned about, whether it's state of Black Lives Matter or whether it's climate change or whatever, I think it wouldn't hurt if we, every time we write a letter or speak to a candidate or do anything on our particular issue, if we remind them that this is part of our democracy. The lives of Aboriginal people depends on the state of our democracy, the state of our climate, our planet's health depends on democracy. So I'm not linked.
Okay, thanks, Margaret. And Christine, and then Tony.
Thank you. I just want to mention a new group that has been developed recently that Barbara's in this group, and Lynn Stevens. There might be others here that are, which is the Women's Climate Congress. So if you're interested in finding out more about that, have a look at the website or Facebook page. It's a really great group that has very similar values to this group.
Thanks, Christine. You could also type it into the chat if you wanted to as well. Tony?
Look, thank you. Look, the dilemma, you're kind of wrestling a bit there, where you'll have individuals who are really focused on a particular issue or 2 or 3 issues, and you're trying to overlay the importance of, you know, really good engagement from a voting perspective, and voting well, and having real clarity about the you know, the candidates. And where it's been expressed by a couple of people, where some people who are pushing particular issues feel they don't have the space to push the democracy part of it, where CAPaD's coming from. So where I'm from in northeast Victoria, we've run into that in the past in a couple of dilemmas that we've had, and one way that we've taught to tie these 2 ideas together is to think about what the structure of a ladder, in that you got the two long legs of a ladder, and they can represent, in this case, it could be the merits of doing democracy well, and the other part could be in relation to particular policies or endeavours you've got as far as outcomes, and how there's connecting steps all the way through. But it's a simple way that if you're just pushing the policy point, you're not actually pushing the engagement part of it. And while you're pushing the engagement part of it through CAPaD, you've got to find a way for people to respectfully tag on there with their your high concerns about particular policies or issues. And so that was just one way that we found here, where people could tie those thoughts together and give space to the other community of people that were doing something that was kind of taking their oxygen, but finding there's a mutual benefit in pursuing both things equally. If you're chasing a policy, you've got to at the same time be chasing good democracy, because you won't connect to people who aren't going to use their vote well.
Thanks, Tony. Look, I think we might draw it to a close now. If anyone wants to just make any comments about how this process went today, or anything in the material that we've dealt with, just put it into chat before you leave. But I'd like to thank you all for the rich conversation, and my understanding of democracy is enhanced by the quality of the questions and the conversation that we've had. So I think transparency and openness in the community is a key part of all of this as well. So thank you very much, everybody. Peter, do you want to say anything in closing?
Well, I'd also like to thank everybody for their input and their contributions, because I mean, it's all been really valuable, and it all helps us build this thing bigger and better. One idea I had is whether, or one thought I had is whether we should catch up again, I don't know, Augustish, to see what's happening, or whether...
What about coordinate that by email, Peter, with folks?
Or I was just saying, if you email secretary at CAPaD,
Okay.
if you want to join the MLA group, or if you want to get put in contact with anything, that might be the way to do it.
Fantastic. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, everybody, and thanks for coming along. See ya.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.